We are Game 2005 in the fall 2020 semester at George Brown, and it's Game Physics, Week 12, Part 2 of our broadcast. And what we're talking about here today is kind of a tour of Unity. We just talked about the theory behind 3D bounding volumes and collision detection, and now we're going to get into the Unity piece. Now, what I asked you to do, before the break, was I asked you to go up and download Unity 2020.1.10. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, pause the video and go do that now, because you can't continue without that, okay, for this part. And now that I have it, I'm going to go to Projects, and I'm going to click New. Now you can, if you have more than one installation, you can choose different installations. I'm going to just choose this one, 2020.1.10 F1. I'm going to choose 3D. There's different options for 3D. If I wanted to do high definition render pipeline, I have this option. This has kind of been out of preview mode. So is the universal render pipeline. Those are more advanced pipelines for graphics and really cool stuff you can do with them in terms of post-processing effects and everything else. Here we can use a 2D game, or here we can use just a simple 3D game. It's what we're going to do, and I recommend it for your project. So I'm going to click this. Next, I'm going to choose a name for my project, which is Game 2005 in the fall 2020 semester, and it's going to be lesson 12, which is our tour of Unity. I'm going to choose a spot. It's not going to go in my experiments folder, but rather it's going to go out to GBC and then Game 2005, where I'm going to put it. All right, there it's where it's going to go. Game 2005, yay, select folder. I'm also going to put this up on GitHub for you later. All right, so yes, that's where it's going, and I'm going to click Create. Again, if you're with me, you're going to see something that looks like this. Okay, it's going to take some time to come up. So hopefully you guys are with me. You guys are doing this Unity tour with me. What is Unity? It is a 3D game engine, commercial game engine, that's been used to make several different games lately. Some notable ones that I know of lately that I've played, or my family's played. Subnautica is one of them. Solasta, a 3D game, that's more like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of game that's been made, and a ton of other ones that have been released lately. That is pretty cool. From a license perspective, you want to choose a personal license. You want to create a personal license. You can go up on the Unity and make a free license. I would recommend personal over student for you right now, for today. So personal license, and a personal license is free to use. You don't have to pay anything. I don't recommend a pro license, since you won't be using Unity at least for another 2 semesters or so after this. So there's no need for you to get anything like that. All right, your Unity probably doesn't look like my Unity. Your Unity probably looks like this. And my friends, I don't think this is a great use of space, but let's talk about how the default layout, what it is and what everything is. Let's talk about labeling here a little bit. Here on the top left corner, you have your scene container. Your scene container starts off with something called a sample scene. Sample scene is just something that Unity gives you to start going with. You have a scene graph. That's what this is, or what we like to call in Unity a hierarchy. All the game objects in the scene that are instantiated upon the scene start are going to be right in here. Did you hear what I said? Instantiated upon scene start. So when I start the game, if I click this little play button up here, that starts the game. Again, no code so far. These 2 objects, the main camera, the scene view, the main camera, and I'm going to just turn on gizmos so you can see the gizmos for a second. You can also increase the size of them. But the scene view is the main camera, and it gives us a little bit of a peek. I'm navigating by using a 3D mouse. You cannot, or a 3-button mouse. You cannot use a 2-button mouse very easily with Unity. I highly recommend, if you don't have a 3-button mouse, to get one for the remainder of this course. That's for sure. But notice all I'm doing is, if I want to orbit, right? Again, I just right-click, and you can see that I'm orbiting around my kind of my center. If I want to pan, if I click the center button, right, as an example, the center button of the middle button inside this view, the scene view this is the view area, if you will. Then I can pan. I can just kind of move the scene around this way. So that's how I can navigate up and down. I can do that kind of stuff, right? If I press the Alt key, right, I can orbit around a point in space. Not me, but something else. So I'm orbiting around, let's say, whatever I'm looking at, right? Notice that I'm orbiting around that. That's the Alt button. And the other one to do is if I press the right mouse button, and notice that there's underneath the eye, there's these little buttons that look like WASD. Well, you guessed it. You can do a fly through with WASD here as well. So if you hold the right mouse button down and you press the WASD keys, you can fly through your scene from a kind of a management perspective. So you can do that as well. All right. So that's how you navigate inside of Unity. Notice that we also have this little gizmo right here in the scene view. Notice I'm in scene view, not in game. Game shows nothing. Scene, that's the actual our debug area where we can actually see what's inside the scene in real time. All right. Again, an advantage of what we have in terms of Unity compared to what we would have if we were using SDL by default. Anyway, so notice that I have this, which is Y up. This gizmo, it shows us this. That's Z in. Z towards the middle of the scene, or towards the screen itself, and then I have X that is to the right. So it's the YX plane if I'm looking at 2D, or the XZ plane if I'm looking at it from a 3D perspective. Now remember the right hand rule. You guys learned about the right hand rule. So what does the right hand rule tell us? Am I using the right hand rule here or the left hand rule? What am I using here? Right, so think about how you're orienting your hand, right? You guys learned about the right-hand rule or the left-hand rule as an example in OpenGL. Well, you know that going into the scene, so if I actually take the handle here of my gizmo and move in, notice that it gets negative. So as I move into the scene, it becomes negative. If on the Z-axis, when I move out of the scene, it becomes positive, right? As an example, I can move this more negative here, less positive in, negative out, and it's wherever the arrow is pointing. And then again, same thing with positive towards the arrow, negative to the other side of the arrow, just like normal. You also have these little points of kind of interest here, right, where you have these little planes, and I'm just going to see if you can see them. So there's a little, almost what looks like a cube here. So from a navigation perspective, if you click the bottom part of the cube, then you can kind of navigate across that one plane, right? The XZ plane. If I touch this one, I can navigate only across the XY plane. And then this is the YZ plane. All right, so I can only go on the YZ plane. All right. So that's what these little areas mean. Okay, so kind of really cool in terms of how this thing works. And that what I'm actually touching on here, what I'm looking at is the main camera. But one thing to note about Unity, when I look at the hierarchy and what I'm seeing over here is, this over here is the inspector. This over here is the hierarchy. Look what I have to do with my mouse. I have to go all the way here to all the way there, every single time. I don't find this useful at all. I don't work like that. So I like a different layout than this, because I find it's a little bit better from a workflow perspective. Down here, what you have is an assets folder. And everything in Unity you put inside of the assets folder. Here, all we have is one single folder inside of our assets folder called scenes. Again, I don't like naming my stuff scenes. I like naming it in a different way. We'll talk about that in one sec. So let's rejig our layout. Again, hierarchy, assets, inspector, scene, right? This is the scene view. This is the game view, and there's others. Let's go to the view. Let's create the view that I like. So I'm going to go to default on the top right corner. Under default, I'm going to choose tall. All right, tall. What it does is it collects my inspector, my hierarchy, and my assets towards the right side of my screen, which gives me a space to work with on the left side of my screen. So I get, and I know Josh laughs at me when I say this, I get more real estate, screen real estate here if I do this. If I want to work with something that's in here. Also, my scene graph is very close to my inspector, so I can just do this as opposed to this, which what I would have to do if I'm moving from the inspector to the hierarchy. I don't like working like that. Also, scenes is here, but what I can do is there's a little slider at the bottom. I can just slide this control to the left so I can make it like a list. This is better for me, how I like to work, right? And I don't like my scenes folder to be with a capital S, just like that. I like to put an underscore in front. I've learned that from doing several learning and videos with Unity. Why? Because then your scenes and maybe another folder, scripts, should always come up the top, because you're going to use this folder a lot. So again, I'm going to just click inside there once, click inside there again, and just rename this to underscore scenes, which is going to make the scenes folder pop at the top. I agree. I don't like the other view, Tam. I think this is the better view to look at. It makes more sense to me. One thing that's missing from my tall view before I make my own view is the console. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. Some people put the console up here. I like to put the console down in there. That's up to you, right? So I want to go to Window. If ever you're missing a view, by the way, it closes by accident. You can go to Window. You can go to General. You can go to Console. And if I put the console window up, you see this little floating window. I can park this window anywhere I like. So I want to park this window down over here, right? Why? I don't need a big console. And here it's close to all this stuff, right? Some people put the console at the bottom too. I'm not really a fan of that. I like putting it right here where I can be really close to what I'm doing. All right. So I put so what happens is if I put the underscore in front of anything, and because it's alphabetical order, it will order itself at the top all the time. So scene's always going to appear at the top. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make a scripts folder. So when I organize myself, I like to put a scripts folder in there, and I do the same thing, underscore scripts. So my scripts and my scenes always stay at the top. I might have other folders like this. I organize myself with materials. I might have other things like models. If I bring a model from Blender, I may have other folders like textures. I'm just giving you examples of what I would have, right? Materials, models, textures, maybe some animations that I would bring in as well, right? And a bunch of other things. One key resource that I like to use is the prefabs folder. I usually make a prefabs folder. And prefabs are almost like I make a template, similar to what we do in Unreal when we make blueprints. That's what prefabs are kind of like. Not exactly, but they're kind of like blueprints in Unreal. And I use them here. I put them kind of in the prefabs folder. All right, and sample scene's not a great name for my starting scene. I don't like that name. I'm going to go into my scenes folder by double clicking, and then change my sample scene name to main by clicking once and clicking again. It's going to ask me a lot of times to rename my scene or save, but that's okay. Notice I was doing all this in play mode, right? It's going to ask me to reload. It's going to change back to sample scene. Anything I do in play mode is mostly undone, but except for stuff I do in the assets folder. My assets folder stayed the same, but anything I did in my scene, that went back to normal. So that's the advantage. In play mode, or in real-time mode, if you will, I can change values, and as an example, and when I'm done changing the value, so for example, let's say I want to change the value of my light. I want to move my light away or rotate my light, as an example, in a different way. So I can change the lighting in my scene. I can do that. But if I stop the play, I'm not in play mode anymore, it goes back to normal, right? That's the advantage of play mode versus editor mode. So this is like, I'm in editor mode right now, right? So this is pretty cool. I want to change my scene so it doesn't say scene. I want to change my scene to main, and I did that. I need to launch main, right? So by double clicking it, and I want to save the scene by pressing Control S. Control S saves the scene. If I go to File, I can also save the project. Please do both. File, save scene. File, save project. Wonderful. We're off to a good start. So that's kind of my pro layout, what I have in here. There's still some stuff that's missing that we can add later, but this is what I recommend. Something that looks like this. Why? You know, really easy way of doing stuff. So if I want to save this layout, I can go simply to the layouts up here, and then I can save it as save layout, and I can call this like Tom's 3D layout, right? And then save it, and I'm good to go. And you can see now I can switch between Tom's 3D layout and the default layout if I want to go back to this ugly thing. Or I can change it to something else, right? Which I have other layouts. Okay. One thing that's good about the tall layout is you can definitely move the size of these. If I'm looking at a scene, I can move it like this. which is pretty cool. I have more control over how much I see, right? I can open up this wider or this more shallowly, kind of close this up as well. Lots of control here in terms of the way I do things. So this is navigation we've just talked about. We've talked about workspace layout and how to do that, as well as some game objects. Let's talk about a game object in Unity really quickly. We still have a lot of time. I want to create a default game object in Unity. I'm going to right click inside of main. This is one of the ways to do that. You can also click the plus button here. If you click the plus button, you can do objects here, or I can right click. If I right click, it gives me a context sensitive menu, and I can decide I want to add a 3D object. Let's add a 3D cube. There we go. Cube obviously been added to my scene. Wonderful. Again, I can do the same thing. I can orbit around myself, right? Almost like the virtual actor that's inside the scene. Or if I press Alt, I can kind of, if I press the right mouse button and use the Alt key, I can zoom in and out. I can zoom in and out also, more of a stepped zoom with my middle scroll wheel, right? If I press the Alt key and press the left mouse button, I can orbit around the object I'm looking at, all right, for the most part. And again, if I press the middle mouse button, I can pan the scene as well, all right? So those are kind of things that we can do. All right, again, you see these control handles, but they don't always have to be here. On the top left, you have controls on how I can move my objects in Unity 3D. By default, this control is selected, but I can always select this one, the hand control. The hand control is like I'm panning around no matter what I do. I can still do the eye, right? I can still zoom in. I can do right click and I can fly through. I can do a fly through controls like normal. I can do all those things, right? But the hand disables the ability for me to select an object, all right? If I want to go selecting, I have to click this, which is allows me to translate an object. This one, which allows me to rotate an object, right? So I get rotational control. I can use this one that allows me to change the scale of an object across different bounding areas. All right, I can do that. And there's others. The way to remember these is the QWERTY keyboard. So Q is the hand, W is the translation tool or the selection tool, E is the rotation tool, R is the scaling tool. Okay, that's how it works. So QWERTY, all right? So kind of simple in terms of navigation. I also have this really interesting tool in the top right corner, which allows me to snap to different directions. So if I want to look at a scene from only the x-axis, I can snap it from the x-axis. You can see I'm looking at it from the right, but I'm still looking at it in perspective view. I can go, again, I can look at it from the front. This is what the front view would look like. I can also rotate. I can grab this tool as an example, right? And I can still rotate. I can still pan like normal. I can still do that rotation as normal, right? So notice I can do this stuff. If I hit the top, I look at it from the top, right? Or I can look at it from the bottom, the back, or the bottom, right? If I keep on clicking these, I can see the bottom. I can click these, and I can kind of look from anywhere I want. I can also, there's a little other tool down here. Notice it says this little, looks like these little lines that are being projected. This is projection. If I click on this, it goes to orthographic. So I can also get an orthographic view of the front, right? Of the bottom, right? Of the back, of the top. I can do all those things as well. And I can switch back from orthographic view to perspective view anytime I want. Again, this is just regular navigation in Unity. What if I lose my object, like it's off screen somewhere and I want to quickly find it? I can click on it in the hierarchy and press the F key. And the F key will do a frame select mode, all right? With the last selection modifier, right? So again, you can still rotate around stuff, to look at it from any position I want. I can also use fly through controls by right clicking. I can fly around here, look around and fly back, right? Really quickly. If I want to fly really fast, I can use the shift key, right? So I can shift in and out really fast, so that I can do that stuff too. So you can fly around and navigate through the scene. I recommend you practice it and try it out. All right, T. This is an interesting one too. QWERTY. T actually does all kinds of stuff, right? It selects, but it also allows me to modify all the extents of my box. It gives me more control in terms of what I'm doing, right? So I can move it around, I can translate, I can do a bunch of stuff. And if you look at it, depending on where I'm clicking with the T on, right? So here's, if I hover over different areas, my mouse changes position, right? Changes, right? I can do this from here, right? Kind of cool. If I go outside of the area, I can rotate, right? That kind of does everything. Grow it, and so on. And what about if I don't like this and I want to go back to normal? If on the cube there is something called the transform component, I can literally go to the right ellipses of any object and click reset. Reset is going to reset the cube's orientation and default size. Okay, that's what it does. Kind of cool. So that is navigation. That is object manipulation. I showed you how to add objects to the scene, and if I was to add any object that appear inside the scene, if I press play, they get something that is viewable inside of the play scene. Notice my camera is a fixed static camera right now. All right, and where is that camera? Well, I can see that too. If I double click on something, I can also see it zaps me out to that, right? So here's my camera. And so I can see what the camera's looking at down here, right? I can change the orientation of the camera just like by using the transform component. I'm going to talk about the transform in a second. So I can use this selection, so I can move it up. I can rotate the camera so I can look at the object. So let's say I want to look at the object. I want to rotate the camera down. I can do that, right? And again, I can do things like I want to move the camera left and right. I want to move the camera in and out, right? So I can dolly or whatever I want to do, right, with the camera. So kind of really cool. You know, kind of controls that I want to do. And I can also press F to frame select the entire thing again. So kind of really cool on how I look at stuff. Yay! But what does this all mean? Let's get rid of the cube. If I want to get rid of objects, I can right click and delete them, right? I can delete them. I can undo, Control Z. I can bring them back, Control Z, right? I can also duplicate objects by Control D. Control D will actually make a dupe of the object. Control D, make a duplicate of the object, right? So that's a quick way of making objects, moving things around, right? I can add other objects, right click, and I can add in another 3D object. Let's say a plane. Here's the plane. Notice the plane kind of gets rid of the cubes. The cubes are really down here, and the plane somehow appeared up here. Again, you can always reset the plane, the transform of the plane, so that it appears here. And if I want to make the cubes appear to be on top of the plane, I can select more than one object at the same time by shift left clicking, and then choose the position on the y-axis to be something like 1, right? Or 0.5. Let's do a 0.5. So I can use the inspector to correctly position things here inside of my scene, all right? Notice that I have automatic shadows. I have a lot of stuff going on and being done for me automatically, okay? Just looking at the time here. All right, so let's get rid of everything from the scene again. Let's get rid of the plane, the cubes. I'll just leave the directional light in the camera. I'm just going to delete these things, right? So let's delete these things here. Right click, delete. And let's talk about an empty game object. Right click and add an empty game object. Create empty is what it says, right? So what is a game object in Unity? In Unity, a game object, all of them have components. It's component based. I'm not going to tell you it's an entity component system, because it's really not quite an entity component system. However, we do build game objects by one component at a time. So here you notice on the right hand side, we have by default, every game object in Unity has a transform component, a position, rotation, and scale vector 3 object. If I go here and I go reset, they all reset to 0s and 1s for the scale. By default, the camera is not set like this. The camera is set up so if I reset it, it goes to 0, 0, 0 with a Z of minus 10, typically, is what it's set to. A Z of minus 10. Okay, just so that the camera is positioned away from the scene. Okay? Back to game object. I want to add stuff to the game object. For example, I want it to draw something. Right? Well, by default, the game object has nothing inside of it. If I want to build a mesh so I can show a game object, right, then I can add a couple things. Let's go to add component. Again, we're talking about no code, low code, something like this, okay? So the first thing I want to add is a mesh filter. Let's add a mesh filter. So I'm building up an object with a game object. So mesh filter. That is a component. The mesh filter, what we can do is we can specify the type of component we want. For example, I want to specify a cube, right? Yay. That's the cube mesh, the default that's built into Unity. I didn't have to make that. It's there for me. And now I want to draw the mesh, and the way to do that is add another component, and I want a mesh renderer. So there, now we have a cube. But the cube is showing kind of this purple ugly color, which means there's no material or shader that's been added to the cube at all. Okay? One thing that's missing here is I want to add a material. So I can add a default material. So if I click on this, there are some default materials that I can use. For example, default diffuse. Right? Default diffuse is basically going to add a diffuse shader to this game object. Right? So if I click on default diffuse, we get what we see here. Right? But what if I want a custom shader? I want something else to make this look different. I want to make it look green as an example, or something else. I can go into my materials folder that I made. I can right click. I can add a new material. And under material, I can rename this thing whatever I want. Let's say I want to make the material green because I want to make my player this cube, right? Then I can click make this green material. I can go into the albedo, or albedo, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Notice that my shader is a standard shader. There's different standard shaders that Unity gives you. Lit shaders. This is a lit shader. That's what a standard shader is. That allows you to accept things like shadows and cast shadows. All right. So let's choose the lit shader, this one here, and I want to choose a different color. I'm going to click on this area here where it says albedo. Click it, and then choose a green color and change the color that I want. I can materially change it down here by numbers, so I can numerically change it. So I can make it exactly green and 100% alpha transparency. I can also choose a different color model if I want to. I like 0 to 255 for now. It speaks to me. Yay, I have a green material. Let's go back to that game object that I just made and apply the material here. Well, you see that there's a materials area here. I just have to drag and drop my material from here to this area right here. And a lot of things we're going to be doing is dragging and dropping. So drag and drop. Now we have a green cube. Right, here's my green cube. Yay! Awesome. Let's rename this cube. So right now it's called game object. That doesn't make any sense. Let's rename it up here. We can name it to player. And now we have a player game object that's a green cube. All right, are you with me? Checkbox or check mark if you're with me. X if you're way behind, you don't know what the heck I'm doing and you're just watching. This is all should be something that should be straightforward for you. But remember, I'm recording this video, so you can always go back and watch the video later. But again, there's some great tutorials that go through the same kind of stuff that that you can use on Unity that do a lot of detail, a lot more detail than I'm doing. I'm really scratching the surface here of the things that Unity can do. Truly scratching the surface, really, really high level. Notice I don't have a collider. By default, if I was to just add a cube, let's add a cube. So 3D object cube. Here's a 3D object cube. And I want to press F to frame select, so it's right here. My cube, by default, has a mesh filter, a mesh renderer with a default material, as well as a box collider. Guys, box collider, assignment 4, not allowed. You need to remove elements too. So if I wanted to remove my box collider from my object, I can go from here and just click on remove component. Now there's no box collider on my box, and if you notice, my cube and my player are practically identical. The difference is that my player is in a different transform position, and my player is using my cube is using a default material, while my player is using my custom green material that I made. Okay, that's it. The rest I made from scratch, as you can see. All objects are game objects in Unity. For example, if I look at main camera, it's a game object with a camera component and an audio listener. That's what it comes with by default, right? The camera is also looking at things in perspective mode. You can change the kind of camera to orthographic if you want, right? There's other things to learn about the camera, and we don't have time to go into it today, but that's the camera. We also have a directional light, and a directional light gives us ambient lighting, right? Which is pretty cool. We're not going to touch the ambient light at all, or the directional light. If I want to, one thing to notice is by default, even my player, when I added a mesh renderer, I'm casting shadows and receiving shadows. I can turn these off if I don't want to. If I just want to make a thing that's purely lit. I can also use a different shader if I want as well. What do we git ignore? All kinds of stuff is the answer. And I'm going to do that right now. So this is a great place to stop. I've done a bit of a Unity tour, and now I want to put all this on GitHub for you. How do I do that? Well, I want to save my scene, Control S, right? And I don't want to be in play mode. So if I go out of play mode, guess what happens? I'm back to a cube. I don't have my player anymore. It's gone because I did everything in play mode. Well, that's easily fixed. I know that the cube, I can change this to player. And I can get rid of my box collider, remove. And if I want to make my player, I already made my material. I can just drag and drop this. And now if I double click on my player, hey, here I am again. I'm back. And I can save my scene. I can file, save my project, right? And when I'm done that, then and only then, when you save your scene and save your project, I'm ready to shut down Unity. I'm going to do that now in order for me to put it up on GitHub. How do I do that? So shut down Unity, save everything, and when it's shut down, it's going to go to the folder that I put it in, which was on the desktop. So I'm just going to go to my desktop folder. I'm going to bring it out in a second. My desktop folder under GVC, you can see that I have this. I want to go into 2005, and I see that I have my project, GAME2005 F2020 Lesson 12. I'm going to use Gitkraken today to help you. So I'm going to pull up Gitkraken, which is my tool of choice for GitHub and Git repositories. If I'm going to use a tool at all, I'm going to use Gitkraken. Typically, I don't even use a tool, like you know. I'm going to use command line, but Gitkraken is a great solution, and it does everything we need from. I know, Yaniv, I'm so sorry. It does everything we need because it also includes a git ignore file that is Unity specific, which is way better. Okay. So let's go into Gitkraken. If you download Gitkraken, by the way, if you're interested in getting this, Gitkraken is free. So you can download it from here. I think it's a great little resource to use. It's visual. If you're going to use a UI, I don't like using UI, but if you're going to use one, Gitkraken is the tool that I recommend. All right. I like it more than Source Tree and GitHub Desktop and a bunch of other ones. All right. So let's look at this. I come up to this as an example, and I want to do something called start a local repo. So I'm going to click start a local repo. I want to target my desktop. So I'm going to target my desktop inside GBC only and inside of GAME2005. I'm not going to go into the project itself. I'm going to stay one level above the project and click select folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to name the project the same name. The name is going to be the same name as the project that's inside of the folder that I'm in. So again, watch this. I'm not in the folder. I'm just one step above the folder. And then I name the project the same. So GAME2005 in the fall 2020 semester, and it's lesson 12. That's what I called it, right? And that's where it's going to look. GAME2005 F2020 lesson 12. Okay, cool. Git ignore. You asked Yaniv for a git ignore file. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to pull down. I'm going to just type in the word Unity. You see I have a Unity-based git ignore file. I highly recommend this. Okay, it's going to ignore the library folder. The library folder, by the way, in Unity is the one folder that you're going to see in your folder structure you do not need. You can regenerate the library folder when you download things from GitHub. If you launch Unity again, it'll download that folder, or it'll reinstall that folder again for you. You don't want to put this up on GitHub, the library file folder. License. We can also choose a license if we want. Let's do it. Why not? We'll choose an MIT license because, hey, maybe we'll sell this thing or someone will use it. All right, so cool. So this is good. This is what I need. I want to click Create Repository. And done. You see that Gitkraken has made my repository, but I have a bunch of unstaged files, right? Here's my unstaged files. I can click on Stage All Changes. Stage All Changes in Gitkraken is equivalent to git add dot, right? That's what it does. So click on Stage All Changes. I use the Unity template in Gitkraken. All right, and now that I've done this, Stage All Changes, sorry guys, I know I'm going fast, but I'm running out of time. I'm going to do basically a added project files as my first commit. So I've got my initial commit that happened when I made my my project through GitKraken. I'm going to use add project files after I staged all changes, and then I'm going to click commit changes to 34 files. Bam. I've got my first commit that I made, and notice that this part right here is my head. It's pointing to my local GitHub repository and pointing to the head of my commit chain, or my branch, if you will. Okay, I'm in the main branch. Hey, but I want to put this up on GitHub. How do I do that? When you sign up for GitKraken, it asks you some stuff. Do you want to connect to GitHub? What is the main source control thing that you're using? And you give permissions to GitKraken to connect with your GitHub repository. Here, all I have to do is go to my remote, click on this plus, and now it's going to show me, well, where do you want to connect? URL, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, something else. What do you want? I want to connect to GitHub, and I want to choose my George Brown College account. There it is. And this is the repository name. The origin name is going to be remote by default, but I can choose my own. And all I need to do is click on create remote and push. And then if everything goes well, you're golden. I'm done. It's up on GitHub for you. All right. So if you look at it, and if I go to GitHub repository online, let's go there. So if I go to github.com/George Brown College, you'll see that the last repository I put up here is GAME2005 in the F2020 semester lesson 12. You can always download this for yourself as well. Here it is. If I go in there, you can see that I've got a README file, and I've also got a license file, which I don't really need, but I got that. And there's no library folder or any other folders in the assets folder that I didn't use. For example, all I had stuff in was materials and scenes, but I didn't have anything in my prefabs folder. I didn't have anything in a bunch of other folders, right? If I want GitHub to remember those things, I need to use a git keep file to do that, right? So that's what it does. All right, really cool. I like this thing, but let's say I'm working with a partner and they make a change. Let's suppose my partner changes my readme.md file. So they go up here and they change my readme.md file. They add in a little bit of markdown. They want to make an H1 tag out of this, and they say something like demo project for game 2005 at GBC, right, as an example, for physics. Right? That's my demo project. I save. I want to save these changes. I want to commit a new change. I did it. So now I have a new README file. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble because I'm out of sync locally. Well, GitKraken can help you resolve that. I can go to GitKraken. Notice that right now, GitKraken thinks that locally and remotely I'm in sync, right? But if I go here next to the pull and I pull this down and click on Fetch All, it's going to get a view of any incoming commits. Look, now I know that my main branch online on GitHub is ahead of my local branch locally by one commit. I can simply pull. Okay, so I can simply pull across the origin remote, and now they're in sync again. And notice now I have a readme.md file locally. To show you this, I can go to my Game 2005 folder, and I can see that I have all that here that I did. Okay, what happens if I pull? Remember I said that the library folder here is local, is my local library folder, but I don't have the folders online. But what if I want to keep the folders online? Well, for example, let's say I go into my assets folder and I have this structure and I want to keep this structure online. Then all I have to do is go into my scripts folder and create a new file called .gitkeep. All right, gitkeep. And the gitkeep file, I want to copy this gitkeep file. I can put it in all the folders that I don't have anything, right? I have something there. I don't have anything in models. I don't have anything in prefabs. I don't have anything in textures, right? And what this does is it allows me to keep my folder structure. Hey, now I've added a bunch of files. Hey, how about my friend? Do we know about them? Well, it says, hey, guess what? My friend GitKraken knows about my changes. They're right here. It says, hey, I added all these things. I want to stage all changes. I want to say that added gitkeep files to maintain folder structure. Okay, and then I can commit all those 5 changes and I can push it to GitHub. And now, when I'm done pushing, if I look back at GitHub, you can see now simply that I have the folder structure that I want up on GitHub. If you download this project, it'll be exactly how I want you to see it. All right, let's put this GitHub link on our Blackboard. So on Blackboard, I'm going to say, I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to do a web link, and we're going to put this in here, and we're going to say GitHub link for week 12. All right, you're good to go, guys. That's it for today. Any questions before we go for today? I know there was a lot, and it was a lot to look at in terms of all the stuff that I just gave you. But this is a good start for everything that you need to get going on the stuff for Unity, for this project, for assignment 4 and on. And every week we get together, I'm going to give you a little bit more Unity so that way you have everything you need for next week. So next week, we're going to talk about making a character controller, how to do that. And I'm also going to allow you, I just want to say this before we part for today, I will allow you to use the character controller that's built in just for the character controller alone. Okay, so I don't expect you to make your own character controller with look controls and all that kind of stuff. It's outside the scope of this course. All I care about is that you can make something that shoots your bullets, and I'm going to show you how to do that right next time we get together. Okay? Any questions before we depart? All right, I'm going to stop recording now. And once we're done,